So it's true, I've been lying in my videos. And actually, I've been lying in two different ways. The first way is that there are a lot of bugs and things wrong with the game that I just haven't been showing in the videos. This bug, for example, where Viv fires in the absolute wrong direction, I just edit the video around. And then the second way that I've kind of been lying to you is about features that are going to be in the game. For example, we talked about updating the basic guns several videos ago, and I still haven't done it yet. So here and now, I'm going to stop lying and be honest. The game's a mess. But we're gonna fix it. The first thing I did to get back on track was write down a list of all of the things that are wrong with the game. Bugs, issues, fixes, balance things, and then write down all of the things that I promised to do and just haven't actually done yet. And please ignore the background, I know I'm a trash panda. So the first thing I worked on was actually adding in the ghost mini-boss, or the linen mini-boss that it's called now. Because in an earlier video I said I added it in, but I never actually did. I just put the art into the game and said it was done. And at this point I've gotten so used to spent shells that things come pretty naturally. So instead of worrying about how I'm going to set up this new mini-boss, I just copy the old one's logic, paste it in, and call it a day. I've got to tweak a few things here or there, but it's basically the same thing. Both mini-bosses take damage the same way and get enraged in the same way when their partners die. The only difference with this mini-boss is that you can't actually shoot them until they get enraged. And of course, this one's not as tanky as the other one, but that's just a matter of changing a couple variables. And the last thing I did was add a new bullet to the game to work with this new mini-boss, and then it was done. One thing that I'm no longer lying about. And then I blinked, and there was this like blur of anime and video games, and suddenly it's 4 months later. And when I jumped back into spent shells, there was a lot of outdated code because it's been 4 months and there was a major update in between. So I thought about going through and changing all of the code and updating everything, but it was easier to just turn off the warning and pretend that it's not a problem. The game still works, so it's fine. It's just technically outdated. Technically. So I pulled up my list again and realized there was still a lot to do. So the first one I tackled when I got back was this annoying, stupid glitch that I put it into the game intentionally. It was a hack that I put in to protect players from going out of bounds, right? But watching playthroughs of the game hurt my soul because, yes, if you go out of bounds, this hacky bit of code I put in would put you back into the room, but if you dash diagonally into the doorway, the raycast that was used to check if you went through the wall then clips that corner before you go out the door and sends you back in, which is jarring and not a fun experience. So at some point down the road, I'm going to need to come back to this and fix the problem of players glitching through the wall, but for now the easiest fix was to just remove it altogether, and I'll find a solution later down the road, because what I had done was introduce a bug in order to fix a bug, which isn't good. The next thing I tackled was Viv facing in the wrong direction, because that's a really silly one that I thought wasn't going to be hard to fix. This one has been an issue since Viv was originally put into the game, and I've just edited around the issue and made it so that you never saw it happening in the videos. And the issue was just because the direction that Viv is facing is dependent on where the player is. So if the player was on one side of Viv, the rotation worked, but if the player was on the opposite side, the rotation will be flipped. So I just had to add another action in there during the part where the bullet's fired to flip Viv back the right way. I've been haunted by this one for a while now, needing to edit it out of videos, but it would have been a really easy thing to just fix if I tackled it when I first saw the issue. But that basically sums up all of life. If you fix an issue when you see the issue, there is no more issue. Next was the Devil's ability. The Devil's ability has a random chance to do nothing, heal you, or make an explosion. And I wanted the explosion to be really, really good. I wanted it to be so good that players would pick this character even though sometimes their ability would misfire. And so I wanted there to be an explosion initially, and then a burst of bullets that fill the room. And I think that I said it in the video, but never actually did it. So I added the fire bullet extension to the explosion, and when this explosion goes off, set it to shoot out 36 bullets with 10 degrees in between each bullet to get 360. And a quick side note about the abilities. When I made the video where I showed off the abilities for the characters, people assumed that Gundu would do what she was doing in the video, which is teleporting all over the place. But that was just God mode. In order for any of the characters to use their ability bar needs to fill up, and that fills up as you collect points. So Gundu can teleport out of a nasty situation, but then before being able to do it again, you're gonna need to kill some enemies to get your points back up. And now before we go any further, I need you to do me a favor. A few videos back, I mentioned changing how the difficulty of the game scales. And so not in this video, but in the next one, I'm going to tackle that issue. And I want to know what you think about this change. So instead of enemies doing more damage per hit, which is one of the ways the difficulty scales right now, instead of that, each hit, whether it be from the spikes or the enemies or the boss, is going to deal 1 damage, instead of damage scaling over time. But the number of enemies in each room will increase, leading to rooms that are completely packed full of enemies. And for the boss fight, I'm going to increase the speed of the animations and movement. Let me know what you think about that idea in the comments. Now the next thing I got to work on was the 3 basic weapons. The shotgun, piercing gun, and sword each had a unique hook that made them interesting to use, but the 3 base guns were just kinda boring in comparison. And so I asked you folks, in the comments of an old video, what you thought I could do with the base guns to make them better. And after talking with you folks and Artman Oil and other people in my Discord server, we came up with some ideas. The first one was going to be the SMG, and for that one, we just even further cranked up the fire rate and turned down the damage. So when you start with the SMG, you get a really high fire rate, and you can try and use that to your advantage. And since it's the only gun that fires really quickly, it now stands out more. But the next gun was the default gun, the basic gun that you're going to start out with. And what we had thought to do with this gun was something kind of similar to Jhin from League of Legends. After so many shots, the next shot you do does a bunch of extra damage. And so we figured it's a revolver, so it's going to have 6 bullets. And so every 6th bullet will do extra damage. And that in itself was pretty easy to set up. You just have a variable that counts up, and when it hits 6, you reset and deal the extra damage. But then the problems came when I wanted to show the player the bigger bullet. So for that 6th shot, I increased the pitch and the recoil of the gun to help sell the impact of that shot. But when I shot the big shot and tried to change the animation of that bullet, it actually applied to all of the bullets in the scene, which is obviously not what I wanted. And so I was about to stress out about this when I realized that the fire bullet extension that I'm using is really old because it's like the original one that was in the engine back when I first started making this game.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
So before I did anything else, I just swapped it out for the newest version of that extension, and it worked. It's almost like not having outdated code is a good thing.
But it was easier to just turn off the warning.
And with that gun working as intended, I played a few rounds with it, and the bullet coming out once every 6th shot was just really hard to use, because in your head you're trying to count to 6, and you're also dodging things, and it's just a lot to kind of maneuver around. So I changed it down to 4 shots, which I think is how Jhin works in League of Legends as well, but it's been a long time since I played that game. And so I changed it to once every 4 shots, and it was way better, because it's easier to just count 1, 2, 3, bang. And the way that I want the game to be balanced is that each enemy should take around 3 shots to kill, and the big shot does triple damage. So the way I see this working out in game is players are going to shoot 3 shots at one enemy, and then use the big shot to pick off something else. And then the last gun to update was the sniper rifle, for which we'd kind of bounced back and forth a few times on different ideas. There were comments about piercing bullets and a laser sight and a mechanic where the further away the enemy is, the more damage it does. But what I went with in the end was a targeting system, kind of. I went to Asprite and created a target that I could lay on top of an enemy to mark it, because I wanted a mechanic where one of the enemies in the room would get marked, and if you shoot that target, it'll deal more damage, encouraging you to try to be accurate and shoot at specific enemies in the room. So the first thing I tried to do was have it so that the target was a permanent thing, and if you picked the sniper rifle, it would just appear and be hidden depending on whether or not it was targeting an enemy. But then I'd need to consider what was happening with the target whenever it was hidden and make sure it wasn't accidentally conflicting with other enemies and all this kind of stuff. So instead, I decided to make it so that every so many seconds, a new target would be created and put onto and linked to a random enemy. And that worked out great until I went to add some effects to it and realized that it was continually spawning over and over and over again on the same enemy. And that's not what I wanted to have happen at all. What I wanted to have happen was one enemy gets picked, and when that enemy gets shot, a new one gets picked. And so the target is constantly moving around the room. And then the last person I lied to was actually Artman Oil, because art makes a lot of art. And sometimes it's too much, too fast, and things get left behind and forgotten about. And so the thing I lied to Art about was swapping out the particle effect for when an enemy dies. The one we're using now is from way back at the beginning when we planned on making like a comic book-esque style game where when you shoot an enemy it goes pop, bang, boom, like the old Batman show where they didn't actually show people getting punched. Well, that's what we wanted back then, but there have been several different attempts at a death particle that Art's made, and I've just never gotten around to swapping them out. And so this time I finally did it. People have asked me a few times why I don't just make a death animation for each enemy. And there's two reasons. One, because that's a lot of animations to make, that's just not a great use of our time. And two, because I love Revita. When an enemy dies in Revita, they use the same death particle effect each time, and you never notice it. The death particle spawns where the enemy was, and that's it, they're gone. They're no longer in the way, and you can keep playing. It's such an economical way to make enemies die. If I'm going to cut corners, that's a place that I'm happy doing it. So again, please comment down below about the new enemy system, because that's what the next video is going to be about. A huge thank you to my patrons. Because of you, my coffee cup is full. And as always, the links to the places that I hang out are down below, and if you decide to click on one, then I'll see you there.